We're at the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead today, and the goal is Harris Mountain. There are two main ridges that you can use to ascend to Harris Mountain. There's one ridge, we'll call it the Western Ridge, and it heads up to the center there where Harris Mountain is, or at least very close to the base of Harris Mountain. And then there's an eastern ridge. They both make a kind of triangle. We're on the Acastus Trail, and they both come down to this area. Anyway, we're going to ascend by the Western Ridge and then perhaps go to Griffith Peak. We don't know. We're going to find out before the day's out. So here we go. Oh, by the way, Mount Charleston Wilderness outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. And it's the second week in July. We'll talk about temperature soon. So pretty quickly, this little trail begins to skirt the edge of this Forest Service complex. It looks like a residential area for employees. And we're continuing on. We're close to the base of our ascent ridge. And so we're going to see how that goes. If there's an access point here, we'll find out. Looks like there's some barriers. But there are other ways I can take if I do not use this access point, because here is the base of the ridge right here. This would be a great road. But as you can see, it's closed off. There's Charleston Peak, by the way. Beautiful morning view. And this Fletcher Canyon area is pretty amazing. Looks like I might be able to work out an access point up ahead. As you can see, we're still on the Acastus Trail, named for a butterfly found only in this area in the entire world. And we're just about reaching the end of that trail. And here is the Fletcher View Campground. There's a wash right here. So all of these are landmarks for where we're going to ascend that approach ridge. And there's Kyle Canyon Road. Fletcher Peak, by the way, the high point above. Fletcher Canyon below that cliff line. Okay, this is what I like to see, is an area that looks like it has a very faint trail going upward. And I'm going to assume that is either going to be approaching that ridge, or when I get up to the first high point, I will see the beginning of the ridge. So let's go ahead and take this a little trail. Wow, this first little section above the campground is straight up, but the trail continues, which is nice. And this is what I've just ascended. So yeah, you must be ascending this ridge about now, because there's nothing else that I saw that is this steep other than the base of the ridge. Let's continue. Wow, that was steep, but it was short. And now we are in a more open level area. There's some power lines, and we crossed those power lines earlier. So that's a good sign too. And I see the base of the ridge. There's the ridge we're looking to ascend. And the main question is, what's the best way up that ridge? If I ascend over in this direction, yes, it's closer, but wow, it looks like there's a rocky area, pretty vertical up at the top there. I'm going to shoot for this area and ascend to the summit of this ridge, or the center of the ridge, right in this area ahead. Looks like there's pretty open area there, and so the question is just how to get there. We shall find out. It looks like there might be a few little barriers in the way, but nothing that looks too horrible. So let's go. Okay, everywhere above those power lines that parallel Kyle Canyon Road and just above Kyle Canyon Road, there's a burn area. That burn area is pretty much clogged with a lot of downed trees. There's some brush, and so it's always a matter of just weaving through this area, and I believe that we'll be up on that ridge soon enough. Once you ascend above those power lines, you're pretty much isolated, so you're not going to see anyone else for probably the entire day, at least till you summit Harris Mountain. And by the way, the summit of Harris Mountain, around 10,000 feet, is about 3,000 feet higher than the elevation where we began, which was the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead, 7,000 feet. Here is that western ridge. So yeah, we are right on course to find a way to summit this ridge. I want to summit to the left of that rocky area right in the center of the screen. So yeah, here we go. Little weaving, and then we'll be above this and things will open up very nicely. And by the way, there are two times that I want to work out. One is the time it takes to get from the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead up to Harris Mountain summit. I started about 7:15, and the other time that I'm looking for is if I continue on to Griffith Peak, what is the time it takes to get from Harris Mountain summit to Griffith Peak. And the reason for those is that this could be a great initial stretch for a 6-peak circuit in the Charleston wilderness that would include Harris Mountain, Griffith Peak, Charleston Peak, Lee Peak, Mummy Mountain, Fletcher Peak. And so yeah, we'll see how that all goes. I'm not going to do that today, but I am timing some of the sections. And then that saddle between Harris Mountain and Griffith Peak, another reason to time that out is because what I'd like to do is a circuit from the Lovell Canyon Trailhead up the Wilson Ridge to Harris Mountain, across to Griffith Peak, and then down Sexton Ridge back to the Lovell Canyon Trailhead. And so that'd be an awesome circuit of Lovell Canyon. However, I don't know what the timing is going to be like, and all the adventures I do are within one day, no overnighters. So the question is, will I have enough time to complete that in the light, and will I also end up running out of energy? We'll see. But for today, we're just testing from Fletcher Canyon Trailhead to the summit of Harris Mountain, and then from the summit of Harris Mountain, possibly to the summit of Griffith Peak. Here we go. Yeah, it's sort of thick, but so far, even though there's some fallen trees ahead to get around, as you can see, we're getting closer to the ridge where things begin to clear up. Get a look at what we've been passing through, and actually it's a lot easier than it looked. You can pretty much weave around all the obstacles. Now, the question when you're in thick grass with all sorts of logs and places to hide here, you wonder about rattlesnakes. And you know, I've been in Las Vegas area since 2016, weekly adventures. Have not seen one rattlesnake yet. There's always that first time. But one thing that I have in my favor here is these yucca stalks, which I use as trekking poles. And what I do is, as I'm trekking through areas like this, these stalks hit the ground before me. I try to make a lot of noise, and if there's anything in the grass that I do not want to step on, the hope is that it will disappear, take off before I get there. So far that's worked. Or maybe there's nothing out here. Who knows? But anyway, yeah, you want to take precautions in an area like this, but I am not really filled with fear about what I might step on because of those precautions. For the records, I ascended a ridge that's just one ridge further than I needed to be. And what I want to be is over maybe one or two little ridges here, and then continue on up. The traverse across this area is not too horrible, actually. And now that we're a little higher, you can see the eastern approach ridge. The summit area might be, as much as 500 feet below the summit. We don't know. We'll find out. And then the western approach ridge. And things are looking good, ascending. Once I hit the summit of this ridge, or the center of this ridge, things should level out a bit. I'd say there's a lot of brush, obstacles, and incline here getting up to this ridge, but things are working out. I just want to be over to that next higher ridge and then ascend that up to this point somewhere in here, just to the left of this rocky vertical type area. So yeah, there should be a nice easy arrival on this ridge rather soon, and then we continue on up. One quick note: when you are trekking through a former burn area, actually a recovering burn area like this, just tread very lightly, because yeah, this is a recovering burn area. And wow, now we can see down Kyle Canyon Road to the Charleston Lodge. Let's take a look here. And then, pretty amazing, the Fletcher Peak area, Fletcher Canyon, is opening up here. You can see Mummy's Toe, the saddle over to Fletcher Peak, and in the base of that saddle is Rain Tree, very famous 3,000-year-old bristlecone pine destination for a lot of hikers. And yeah, in the distance here, Gas Peak. At the very summit of Decatur Road in Las Vegas, if you kept going straight up, you'd hit the cliffs at the base of Gas Peak. There are other ways to summit Gas Peak, and I've summited by a lot of those ways, LasVegasAreaTrails.com, and have that documented. Okay, so onward. And by the way, when you're up on Gas Peak, you've got the best view of Las Vegas that you could have, even better than being in an airplane. You're looking straight down, and you can see just the entire Las Vegas, just like you're flying over Las Vegas, only you're not looking out the tiny window of an airplane. Yeah, so lots of amazing places in this area, but we're going up to Harris Mountain. Okay, now we're around 7,200 feet, and correction on the starting altitude. Now that I think about it, it was more like 68, 67. So we've ascended about 500 feet from our starting point, at least. All my altitude readings are probably going to be plus or minus, well, yeah, plus or minus 200 feet. But when your total ascent for the day is in the area of 4,000, 5,000 feet, that error is not, margin of error is not, doesn't matter. So as you can see, as you're looking around, yeah, we're still in the burn area, but things have begun to thin out compared to what we were experiencing below. So that was a little evil band of burned trees and fallen trees down below there. Yeah, looking down Kyle Canyon Road there. And then there's the eastern approach ridge. And we are ascending toward the center of the western approach ridge. So that kind of tells the story where we are. Let's keep going up, and things are going to open up even more. Okay, now seeing my target approach area somewhere right up through here, and then find a way through the rocky area to the summit of that ridge. Doesn't look too horrible, but who knows? You gotta wait till we actually get up there. Here is that western ridge, and there you can see the cliffy area right at the edge of it, and then it continues on up to the Harris Mountain area. I don't know if that's Harris Mountain or still below Harris Mountain. We just don't know yet. And ultimately, at some point, I'll go to Harris Mountain, then descend by way of the eastern approach ridge, which you can see heading down in this direction back to Kyle Canyon Road area. And just to see a few landmarks here, there you can see Deer Creek Road heading off to the left, Kyle Canyon Road continuing downward, and then I'm going to zoom in on the Charleston Lodge and the Visitor Gateway, Spring Mountains Visitor Gateway. Charleston Lodge. And where is that gateway? You might already seen it. There's a lot of glare on the screen here. I think we're looking at the Spring Mountains Visitor Gateway right in this area. Not totally sure. Too much glare on this screen, but what you see will be much more clear. So you're probably seeing everything I'm talking about. And then over this direction, you can see Fletcher Peak and the cliffs of Fletcher Canyon. And there's Fletcher Peak area right up here. And then the saddle over to Mummy's Toe, and at the base of that saddle is Rain Tree. Then just to complete the 360-degree view, here we are back on, approaching the center of that eastern ridge where things should level out a lot more than what we're experiencing here. Okay, onward. By the way, I think I might have referred to this as the Eastern Approach Ridge. Actually, if I did, I was wrong. It's the Western Approach Ridge. Okay, onward. Okay, as usually happens, as I approach the center of this Western Ridge, a way appears to open up. And you see those rocks right ahead. I'll just stay to the right of the rocks and then get on that little spur that should bring me to the center of the ridge, bypassing rocky barriers. That's the plan. I was wondering whether I should do the gully here instead, but as I get closer, the gully looks like it's got a lot of more rocks to climb over. So I'm heading up to this rock on this neighboring ridge and then turning upward along the spine of that ridge. And that should put me, a couple thousand feet below Harris Mountain, which is leading me to believe that this is not Harris Mountain, because that just seems too close altitude wise. But we don't know. Let's find out. And let's do a quick sweep, see where we are. Yes, huge tree. You'd be looking down Kyle Canyon. Here's my trekking poles. Wow, they are really useful, keeping stability and then also utilizing my upper arm strength. And these things, though they don't fold, which is a drawback, so I can't stick them in my backpack, but they are as light as balsa wood and as strong as steel. So they also, they don't collapse on you. And they're looking toward Mummy Mountain, Fletcher Peak. And then just continuing, I'm not in a very secure spot right here, but yeah, I can do a 360. Continuing around to, you're gonna see blue sky pretty soon. Right to the place where I started. Okay, now I've really nailed that barrier ledge in the Fletcher View Ridge adventure. And yes, this is that barrier ledge. There is a way through the center, but it is very, very steep. But you can see once you get above that barrier, there's more steep stuff above. But anyway, you can see what things look like in the area, and maybe when you don't have the glare that I'm experiencing on the camera right now, you can make out a pathway from that ridge and that ledge. You can see how it covers both the east and the west side of that ridge. Maybe you can descend below into the gully and then ascend. I don't know. There are possibilities, and you can see them all right before you. Time for a quick check-in. I'm way above that rock we were looking at earlier. In fact, you can't even see it on this ridge. I'm on a fairly level area, so I can look around a little better. Anyway, ascending this ridge to this point has been like ascending the Empire State Building twice with loose rock, angled, taking 3 steps at a time. And there's still some more to go. I'm aiming for this area up ahead now. So we'll see how that goes. That looks even steeper, but once up on that area, I'm on the approach ridge, which is good. So that may be Harris Mountain. I'm thinking now that it is. So that's a good sign. We have ascended close to, let's see, well, a little over 1,200 feet or so from our start point. So yeah, every step is an 18-inch, 12 to 18 inches incline elevation gain. So yeah, it's really steep, but we're getting close to the top of this ridge where things should level out a bit. No promises. And another look at that barrier ledge. You may see a way through the middle. That's where I stopped and turned around. That's the barrier ledge on what I call Fletcher View Ridge. Okay. Onward. Let's see what this little stretch brings. And here's a cool view down to Fletcher Canyon, or Kyle Canyon, I should say. And we're looking down to the Charleston Lodge, then over this way to the Spring Mountains Visitor Gateway. And yeah, maybe, just maybe, the trailhead where I began. Is right down here. Okay, just maybe there is a way through this little opening in the rocks where that tree is. Let's find out. Could lead to a dead end, but as I look around, I'm not seeing a whole lot that looks more promising unless I headed up in this direction, but I don't know. I think I'm going to try this little opening here. And then this is looking around. Intersection with Deer Creek Road. And there is Eagle's Nest Loop area. So there's a few little areas to look at there. Okay, and then in the distance is Gas Peak, the pointy peak. And to the left of Gas Peak, over this ridge in the foreground, is the Sheep Range. Not really good views because the sun is in front of us. But there you have it. And then looking up the eastern ridge across the way toward Harris Mountain. And there I believe is Harris Mountain summit. But I've got to get up this ridge in order to get to the summit of Harris Mountain. And my way is going to be straight up. So I can't even turn to show you. But anyway, there you have it. Okay, that last section was definitely class 3, but doable. And the good news is that I made the approach ridge. Here we are on the ridge, and there you see views opening up. Fletcher Peak on the right, Mummy Mountain on the left, Mount Charleston Loop, Lee Peak, and Charleston Peak at the summit of Kyle Canyon. I'm kind of shaking, I'm just exhausted. There's Charleston Peak. Looking down, Cathedral Rock. A lot of really cool, familiar things to look at. There is the south approach to Charleston Peak. If you're on the South Loop Trail, you're going to summit the area somewhere right above this grassy area. That's where the trail junction is. Yeah, shaking because I'm exhausted. So I don't know how steadily I'm holding this. There you see Griffith Peak. And then the saddle. And indeed, this up ahead is Harris Mountain. We've been looking at Harris Mountain directly between the eastern approach ridge on the left and the western approach ridge that I'm on right now on the right as you're standing at the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead. So there you have it, and then another look at that barrier ledge that we faced about the 9,000 foot point on what I refer to as Fletcher View Ridge. And that barrier ledge stopped me, but yes, there is a passageway in between, but then, wow, when you get above that barrier ledge, it's pretty steep to summit that ridge above. So I think I was right to turn around. Anyway, here we are on the western approach ridge. Things have leveled off, even a little bit of downhill ahead, which will be very nice. And hopefully everything's going to connect and we'll be up on Harris Mountain soon. We are at 8,100 feet approximately at this point. So we still have a couple thousand feet to get to the summit of Harris Mountain through the trees there. Funny thing, this ridge has leveled off to assume the incline we usually complain about when we're on switchbacks, which is actually a welcome incline compared to what I've been on. As you can see, there are two ridges here leading up to the summit. This ridge I am on and a ridge over on this other side, which is even more gradual. I'm hoping that I can cross over where the gap between comes more shallow as we continue to rise up this ridge. You can see that crossing over at this point, there's a really large gap. By the way, we're looking down toward the Rainbow subdivision area, Upper Rainbow subdivision, and who knows, I may just do a descent down that area if I decide not to continue on up to Griffith Peak today. I don't know. Maybe I'll be more revived, but yeah, that last 1,500 feet has really been draining. There's another 1,500 left for the summit of Harris Mountain. Okay, time to check in. We are on the western approach ridge, and Harris Mountain is up ahead through the trees, but still probably about 1,500 feet higher than the elevation where we are. It doesn't look like it, but yeah, according to my altimeter watch, which isn't very accurate, it's in that area. The more gradual ridge is over here to the right. I don't see a way across without diving deep down into a little canyon, so I'm not going to do that, hoping that there will be a crossover point further up here. Looks like there might be. It's just a wild guess. Anyway, yeah, what are we seeing? The saddle between Harris Mountain, Griffith Peak. And then the south rim of Kyle Canyon leading over to Charleston Peak. And then the upper end of Kyle Canyon between Charleston Peak and Lee Peak. And then the north rim of Kyle Canyon leading up to Mummy Mountain. And then we've got the saddle between Mummy and Fletcher Peak. And there that is. And then an idea of this approach ridge that we are on. Very beautiful ridge. But this I would not classify as a shortcut to Harris Mountain. If you got four-wheel drive, go find the trailhead on Harris Mountain Road. A lot faster. If you don't have four-wheel drive, I don't know what to say. This is not very fast. Maybe from the South Climb Trail, skirting the Rainbow subdivision, above the subdivision, and then heading up that ridge just over this canyon. And you see that ridge leads right up to Harris Mountain. This one might also. We'll see what things look like as we get closer. So there's an idea of where we are, what this ridge looks like. A lot of spring flowers here in the middle of July on a day when it's 114 degrees in Las Vegas Valley. And here on the mountain, I'd say 80 degrees with a nice light breeze. So can't beat that. Okay, continuing upward, looking for a crossover point to this next ridge. Hopefully there will be a shallow crossover up ahead. Looking downward from a little further up, the western approach ridge, and shows it to be anything but gradual. Beautiful ridge, but a lot of weaving around, fallen trees, brush, and quite the incline. And yeah, looking down the canyon between this ridge and what looks like the more gradual ridge to the right, but continuing up now through ponderosa pines. So let's continue and see where this leads. Hopefully we'll be able to continue on at least a gradual enough approach ridge here. Time to check in again. We're closing in on 9,000 feet. Not too far from Harris Mountain, which leads me to believe that my altimeter is really off. But anyway, yeah, let's take a look down. We'll look at the Charleston Lodge, and to the right of that, the Spring Mountain Visitor Gateway. And you can see the sheep range, more of it, and also Angel Peak. And then looking down the ridge here, beautiful portion of the ridge. It's fairly gradual, but boy, there have been some steep points in this ridge, so it's not just a walk up the hill. It's there are some steep loose rock areas on this ridge. You're looking at Fletcher Peak and Mummy Mountain. Now let's just take a look at this ridge. You can see spring flowers, second week in July. Very beautiful. And then Harris Mountain above. We'll get a better view of that when we get through the trees up here. So there you have it. And by the way, another view of that ledge that I faced up near the top of the Fletcher View Ridge adventure. There's that ledge, and you see there is a passageway in between those two vertical areas, and then one could, if that passageway is good, one could continue on up. It looks like it's steep, but very possible to continue on up to the summit. So yes, the Fletcher View Ridge would do it too. But here's my read on these approaches to Harris Mountain from below in the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead area, is that they are not shortcuts. I imagine I'll have put over 5 hours into this trip by the time I summit Harris Mountain. Definitely going back down will be faster. Hopefully not too much faster. I don't think I'm going to go on to Griffith Peak today. But yeah, if I were doing a 6-peak circuit, or even doing a circuit between Griffith Peak and Harris Mountain, and then back down the Griffith Peak Trail, I think that, boy, I'd be pretty much wiped out by the time I hit Griffith Peak. So not enough energy to continue on to the other peaks. So there you have it. This is where we are right now. And yes, beautiful alpine ridge. Still around 80 degrees with a light breeze. It's, what time is it? It's just after 12, so I'm imagining in Las Vegas now, the thermometer has hit 110 degrees and going up to 114 today. And that's if you're in the upper valley, Centennial Hills area. If you are down in Henderson, add about 5 degrees to that. Okay, we're through the trees and there is potentially Harris Mountain, but my altimeter says it should be another 1,000 feet higher from where we are right now. That's only about 300 feet higher, which would mean that Harris Mountain would be 700 feet higher than this high point up ahead. So we will see. That means this is a false summit and we need to continue going upward. But at least things are leveling out a little bit and looking really nice. Well, I'm at that high point, and yes, Harris Mountain is 2 more high points above me. I'm over 9,000 feet, probably 9,200, and so 800 feet to go. And looking around, they're looking toward Griffith Peak. Some really unique perspectives here. There's Griffith Peak, the saddle between Harris and Griffith. The south ridge of Kyle Canyon. And let's zoom in a little bit. Griffith Peak. Charleston Peak. Lee Peak. North ridge of Kyle Canyon. Mummy Mountain. And that pointy peak through the saddle there is Mummy's Head. Rain Tree is right at the base of that saddle. There's the saddle to Fletcher Peak. Angel Peak. And then this burned bristlecone pine in the foreground. Behind it is the Sheep Range. Circling around, see we're in beautiful high meadow. Back to Fletcher Peak. I mean, not Fletcher, Harris Mountain. And to give you an idea of time and distance, I have done the entire Charleston Loop Trail in 7.5 hours. I'm closing in on between 5 and 6 hours right now, just getting up to Harris Mountain by this approach. Okay, let's take a look at what's below us. Cathedral Rock, Charleston Village, Rainbow Subdivision, so that pretty much tells the whole story. Of course, there is Coxcomb Ridge. There you have it. Resting on this ridge and refueling from my reading of the ridge. I don't know. I may be the only person to have sat in this spot for the last 10, 25, 50, 100 years, maybe ever. There's no signs of people. There's Griffith Peak. Charleston Peak. Can't see Mummy Mountain and Fletcher Peak through the trees, but here's a good shot of Angel Peak. There's actually a football or a soccer field up there. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go for the next, oh, by the way, yeah, Charleston Village. There you have it. Beautiful little alpine ridge. Only probably 5 miles from the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead, 6 miles, but entirely isolated. Okay, let's make the final approach to Harris Mountain Summit directly ahead. Well, we are closing in on Harris Mountain Summit. Maybe there's another fall summit, who knows. My altimeter watch says there should be 500 feet more to go, but I don't know. Doesn't look like you can get much higher than we are right here. So anyway, yeah, beautiful bristlecone pine, mixed pine forest up here, very close to Harris Mountain Summit. A bit thick in places. So let's continue squeezing our way through. It just seems like I should be on the summit or very close. It just feels like the summit. We don't know for sure, but yeah. Okay, my altimeter watch reads 9,240 feet. However, the summit of Harris Mountain is just a little over 10,000 feet. So, lets you know how much off my altimeter watch is. I guess I could do a reset on it, or I could just remember, subtract 800 feet. But here we are, summit of Harris Mountain. And here is the summit box. Looks like a little Altoids box almost. This is a very wild mountain summit, buzzing with life, untouched due to the remoteness of the trailheads and the access. In fact, what time is it? It's 2:19. It was 7:19. So that's 7 hours to get to this point from the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead. And as I said, I've done the Charleston Loop just a few years ago in 7.5 hours. So yeah, you could do the whole Charleston Loop in the time it takes to do what I just did here, getting to Harris Mountain Summit But the great thing is it's such a wilderness adventure. Now, last time I was here, I came up from Lovell Canyon and took the Wilson Ridge up to this summit. And Lovell Canyon is below. You can see it down here. So I'd started at the Lovell Canyon Trailhead way down there. And it took about the same amount of time to get up to this point. So yeah, it's a pretty brutal little climb from the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead. There's Griffith Peak, and there is a saddle between Harris Mountain and Griffith Peak, and the Griffith Peak Trail. And I'd like to try that in the future. Do not have enough energy to attempt that today. Wow. Descending 1,000 feet, reascending 2,000 feet. Nope, not in the plan. Let's see what else we can see. And here we're looking over at the Rainbow Mountains. On the left is going to be Bridge Mountain, then Rainbow Mountain, then Mount Wilson. Bridge Mountain, Rainbow Mountain, Mount Wilson. And there's Potosi Mountain, the south end of the Spring Mountains, of which the Rainbow Mountains are a part. And we've looked down the Wilson Ridge. Here we're looking over at Griffith Peak, and then looking down to the left, that's Sexton Ridge. I've always thought it'd be great to ascend the Wilson Ridge from the Lovell Canyon Trailhead and then cross this saddle and descend Sexton Ridge from Griffith Peak. But I don't know. That just seems pretty huge at this point. And then another thing, another adventure I'd like to try at some point is there's that eastern approach ridge to Harris Mountain from the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead. And it's straight ahead here. And it is possible, maybe, I'd like to find out if it's possible to descend by the eastern ridge. I'm not going to do it today because I don't know if it's possible. I don't want to get half down there and then find that there's a barrier cliff. So not going to do it. Okay, here's the Las Vegas Valley. Harris Mountain Road in the canyon below. And here's a better shot of the Wilson Ridge. Yeah, you can see the whole thing to the what I call the south high point. That's descending from Harris Mountain. You just follow the ridge, and theoretically here, it connects with the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridge line, and you can take that all the way over to Potosi Mountain. And I'll put all those connections together before too long. And there is Harris Mountain Road. Down there is where you find the trailhead to right at that little loop that you saw a moment ago. That's where the trailhead is to Griffith Peak. It's kind of a back trail. It's a very remote, beautiful trail that has been created that goes along the base here of Harris Mountain, circles around to the saddle between Harris Mountain and Griffith Peak, and then ascends to Griffith Peak. So yeah, to do that, you probably want to drive up Harris Mountain Road to that trailhead and start there and head up to Griffith Peak and back. So yeah, there you have pretty much the whole story of where we are. Very beautiful up here on Harris Mountain. Remote, untouched, wild, buzzing with life. Lots of insects here. It doesn't have that look of the trampled down summits. Charleston Summit definitely. Mummy a little less. Griffith Peak, yeah, sort of trampled down. But when you're here, you really feel like you're the only person to be up here. This is what these summits looked like hundreds of years ago. Not much change at all. Yeah, if you were standing here 500 years ago, this is pretty much what you see. Except for the Air Force installation on the summit of Angel Peak, and then the Las Vegas Valley below. Everything from here onward is unchanged in the last 500 or more years. Pretty cool to imagine that. You wonder what it would be like to go back in history. Well, here we are, a historic location. Just 40 miles from Las Vegas. And by the way, I don't remember if I pointed them out, but here are the Madre Mountains. And all these high points that I pointed out, there are adventures in LasVegasAreaTrails.com. And each adventure contains a map, a slideshow with some really beautiful images that I put through a 10-step Photoshop process to sharpen, and a detailed description. The map is a Google map that I created, actually, connected with the Google Maps system, so you can actually zero in on it, enlarge it, and find the trailhead. You can trace the route. You can look at the terrain version. You can change it to satellite. It's pretty cool. Okay, anyway, Harris Mountain. Time to check back in, retracing my way down this ridge, and my target is that high point and skirting it to the left. So yeah, it's pretty steep ridge, but it looks like it's doable. I came up the ridge, so it better be doable. There's only one direction I can go. Okay, onward. Okay, remember that other ridge a little bit to the left. It was to the right on the way up. Looked more gradual. Well, and it ends in the Rainbow Subdivision where I've been before. I think I'm going to go for that ridge to avoid some real steep downhill. Avoid at least steeper downhill. There's a lot of steep downhill here. So that's now my target instead of this, but I'm not entirely sure. So let's just see what happens. I think I might have taken this ridge before on the Griffith Harris circuit page of LasVegasAreaTrails.com. It's a more gradual ridge, but it ends in the Rainbow Subdivision. So we'll be dealing with probably dogs and other disturbances down there. But this is a more gradual ridge. So, and there will be a little backtracking on Kyle Canyon Road, but nothing compared to what I'd be faced with had I taken the other ridge. And so here you can see the two ridges, one to the right and then one straight ahead. And the one straight ahead is the ridge I am taking down just for a change here. The one to the right is the one I ascended, very steep, and you can see that it definitely ascends more. So I think this is more natural as a slope. So we're going to take this ridge straight ahead. Well, this ridge has been slow going. As you can see, that is the ridge over there that I summited and then took up to Harris Mountain. This ridge, a little more gradual, a little less exposed, but still quite a puzzle. And there are some drop-offs that I've had to navigate. But moving down steadily, and it looks like by the time I get to that point, we'll be looking at more level ground, more gradual. Well, I've arrived at the Rainbow Subdivision. I'm now on an actual road. This is the ridge, the West Ridge. And I actually came down a ridge over just west of that. So, gives you an idea where I landed. So now it's just a matter of taking this road down and hoping that it connects with Kyle Canyon Road. Just as I was hoping, it looks like this road might wind around the base of the Western Ridge and then come out somewhere around Fletcher View Campground. And then it's just a matter of walking the Acastus Trail back to our start point. So everything's looking really well. And another way of getting to this western approach ridge would be to take this little road, wind upward, and then take a left onto the western approach ridge. That would save a lot of time, maybe an hour. But for now, we're just happy to be heading back. Well, this little road continues to circle around the base of the western approach ridge. There is the western approach ridge. So, yeah, let's just stay on this little road and see where it leads. Well, it looks like the road is abandoned. It's a road / trail. There are the power lines. That's a good sign. We are now going to cross under them. We'll end up below the power lines, which means that we are between the power lines and Kyle Canyon Road. So all is well. We just need to figure out when to angle down toward Kyle Canyon Road, which is to the left here. Good news, the road's angling downward, and I can see Kyle Canyon Road below with cars on it, and there's the fence that marks the Acastus Trail. So all is looking good. I'll probably need to jump that fence, but otherwise, once I get on the other side of the fence, it's just a matter of taking a right turn and heading along to the start point at the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead area. So this presents an alternate approach that probably would streamline the approach to the western ridge. Maybe save, like I mentioned, about an hour. Yeah, here's the lower fence and the Acastus Trail. So all is well. Well, we saw this fence and road earlier, and this is where we ended up at the Acastus Trail right here. So now it's just a matter of heading back to the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead. And here we are back at the Fletcher Canyon Trailhead. There's the bridge, and there is the beast. So to summarize, we took the western ridge up to Harris Mountain, which is way up there, and then headed back on a ridge just west of that. What an adventure. And we're back at the beast.